I've not done a questions and answers video in a while, so I asked the Patreon supporters, give me some questions and I'll answer them. And if you've got questions you want to ask for a future video, then you can leave them down in the comments down below. So let's start with the first questions. And I'm going to divide this. I've got a lot of questions here. So I'm going to make this around about a 20-minute video. And if there's any more left after that, I'll put it in a separate video just to avoid too many questions and answers all at once. So let's start with the first question. Baz said, did you consider building a shop in Glasgow instead of the Isle of Man? It would be really nice having a workshop in Glasgow, but Glasgow is a big city, and like most big cities in the UK, gentrification has taken over and it has been invested in by property speculators, which means that the only place I'd be able to afford premises, if I could get them, would be just on the outskirts of Glasgow in an industrial estate where not only would it involve like hours of travel every single day to go there, but it would involve security issues. Big cities are not a place to have a workshop these days in the UK. Gadget Boy asks, I've really been enjoying watching Glass Slinger make tubes. Tubes as in tubes and valves. But I'm no closer to understanding why they work. Would you be interested in doing some videos on the theory? I am not the best person to answer stuff like that. There are people on YouTube who are totally into tubes and valves, and they're the best people, but the basic theory is you've got heated filaments that emit electrons, and those electrons are steered by metal plates with fields on them to provide various amplification and steering effects. That's a very crude summary. As I say, I'm not the best person to answer stuff like that. The closest I get to using anything resembling a tube is a little gas discharge tube, a little neon, but not an actual cathode ray tube or stuff. I suppose cathode ray tubes, they're quite interesting, but again, they're kind of rare too. Now, Kennewick Man says, I always enjoy walking and talking. You're up for it. Lots of cool stuff to see. Now, there's an idea. That would have been an idea. I could have recorded this out in the local park where there'd have been a scenic background. There would have been other people, though, probably been kids, which I'm not really keen on the idea of them appearing in the videos. Yeah, also wind would be an issue and background noise. But, you know, that's something I'll consider in the future. That's well worth considering. Aaron Nadler says, do a Lewis Rossman-style bicycle ride. That would require a bicycle. Walking is more my style. I walk a lot. Derek Bissett asks, name 5 of your favourite YouTubers. This is where you might expect me to name some of the prominent electronic YouTubers. In reality, in the same way that the software guys watch electronic channels for recreation, the electronic guys, although we do watch each other's channels, we tend to go for mechanical or art types of channels and stuff like that. So for me, my favourite styles of channel are like Ave, South Main Auto, Steve Summers, A-Bomb, and sort of channels like that, and Lockpicking Lawyer, who also gets mentioned later on in these questions and answers. But you know, those aren't necessarily my 5 favourite. I couldn't really pick favourites. Peter Harkins asks, I've asked in a live stream, but don't know if you've seen it or avoided the question. May you ask, did you ever come out to your parents? If so, how did they react? My parents were, well, particularly my dad was very religious, so I didn't really officially come out to them, but I think they gradually worked it out over time. It wasn't a decisive coming out experience. Gareth Ashley asks, reusing 18650s from battery packs, any tips in dealing with welded nickel strips? I've been grabbing the ends and peeling them back slowly, and it was kind of working. Then I did one which let out a hiss when the weld popped, which is a nice sound when you're opening an MRE ration, but I'm guessing not for lithium-ion batteries. It was long dead and nothing happened, but it made me think there must be a better way. Any suggestions? I find that because the little nickel tabs have been spot welded on, if you try prizing them off, the chances are you're going to puncture the cell. So I don't actually recommend taking them off at all. What I do is if I want to keep them short, I'll fold them at the point that they meet the welds, and I'll fold it backwards and forwards until they snap off. Or, as someone else mentioned here, Mustafa's Fleas mentioned, I do the exact same thing. On the positive end, some of the cells don't have a little button on them, the tabbed cells, so I will sometimes fold the strip a couple of times to make a little pip at the end so it goes into battery chargers properly. Josh Meyer. Oh, it's a political question. Any interest in touching the third rail of independence, or is it better to avoid pissing off everyone in the currently United Kingdoms? I don't really get involved in that anymore. Technically speaking, I have to place votes if I'm going to do votes on the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is not part of the UK and so on. I'm kind of for Scottish independence, but only to show the rest of Britain that they don't need the Westminster to show them what to do. But you know what? Controversial subject. We'll see what happens. I have a horrible feeling it's just going to be political, and that they'll run these referendums and they'll always just lose by a little margin, because I think it's all a fix. Baz says, are you interested in doing a YouTube series set up as a class? Electronics 101. Not really. It would be an interesting idea. I should cover more subjects in greater detail. I've not really done that. But generally speaking, one of the best ways and most enjoyable ways is just to pick little snippets up randomly from different videos. I'm not sure. Maybe that isn't the best option. I'm not sure. I'll consider that. Lawrence Solonek asks, what technical videos have you done in the past that you'd like to do a sort of redo, and why? Mainly the old Potato Vision videos, but also there are some videos that were good, but because they were back then, they didn't get much viewing, and more information has come up since in those particular subjects, so they're quite kind of good to actually redo, but I can't think of anything in particular. Witold Witowski says, what's changed in Glasgow since I've last been there? Glasgow, COVID is kind of like past in a way. Everybody's kind of wearing masks or not wearing masks. There's huge quantities of people everywhere mingling. It's like the hustle and the bustle is back in Glasgow, but some of the big shops have closed and some of the smaller shops are just fine, but everything's not quite right yet. But Glasgow's getting there. Looking forward to spending a lot more time in Glasgow, and when I'm spending a lot more time, there's going to be proper Glasgow meets, like we can get together for a decent chat and drink. I'm cautious doing that at the moment because I don't want to get gatherings of people and risk becoming, associated with the spread of COVID from that point. But right now, it's like every other town and city. They've basically said, screw it. If you were offered a vaccine, if you've had your vaccine, then you should be fine. If you didn't, that's your tough shit. They're taking that thing, and everybody's just basically just saying, screw it. We're done with this COVID thing. And as a result, it's gone apocalyptic. What can you do? It was predictable. Nuts and Brown says, selfish question, do you see €2 super chats when I say bonsoir? You missed some. Here's the thing. If I'm doing the live streams and I look down at the chat, I get distracted very easily. And when I get distracted, it puts me off what I'm talking about. So I tend not to look at the chat. But normally, the super chat contributions, which I appreciate all of, they appear as a little flag at the top. But the little $2 ones, or €2 ones at the bottom, don't appear as flag. The bigger the contribution, a little tab appears with a timer on it, just so it hangs about longer, so it's more likely to be seen. I do try and acknowledge every single super chat, no matter what value it is. I find it awkward when I watch other streams where people are just completely ignoring the super chats. I think that's kind of selfish, but that's just I prefer that. Nuts and Proud, did you fly or drive to Glasgow? I flew, and I have to say that the COVID-ish thing was causing major problems with the flights. The flight over was a bit awkward. It wasn't too bad. It was wearing masks in the plane and all that. But when we got there, we had to sit in the plane for ages because there was no staff to come and escort us into the airport terminal. On the way back, there was a huge delay, not the fault of Logan Air at all. I could see their staff were just working long hours. They're having a bad time because of the COVID taking number of staff levels down. And also, the icing on the cake when we finally got to the Isle of Man, I was waiting in the baggage conveyor, and you know that little siren that goes off before the conveyor starts moving the luggage? It was really loud. It turned out it was a fire alarm, and we all got evacuated, and our luggage was still in there. That was quite annoying. But that's what happens. What can you do? It's just everything happened. It was a very tiring day. Jerry BVR says, have you ever had an interest in model railways, Meccano or Lego? Ralphie was the one who had the model railway. I did play with Meccano. Meccano in the metal form and plastic form and Lego. Great, I really like those. They're good practical toys to play with when you're young. The plastic Meccano was rubbish because it's just the scale of it. It's just suitable for building big, stylized things. The metal Meccano was much more useful, but because it was my dad's set of metal Meccano, he didn't really like the kids playing with it. That's what happens. Darren Watson says, are you going to do more videos with your brother as I like them? I'll try, but Ralph is quite fussy. He's the one that makes that difficult. He doesn't really like doing the sort of other joint videos. Mike Hanley asks, do you think laser diodes will eventually replace LEDs? I don't think so, because ultimately a laser diode is a more complex device than an LED. I wouldn't say it's much more efficient. So I think laser diodes will be laser diodes and LEDs will be LEDs. But I see the progress of, instead of, like, say for instance, the green lasers, instead of, or the blue ones, well, the ones that use DPSS, diode pump solid state, that use a whole cascade of crystals to convert infrared to a different wavelength and then double it and so on. I see those being reduced to just a little chip on its own, which is kind of happening, which is quite good. I'm not keen on these car headlights that use lasers to stimulate the phosphors. It just seems like they're really cremating the phosphors, and also they pose an high eye hazard risk for the people who work on them. Although you're not supposed to repair them, of course. James Zvars says, have you ever played around with Tesla coils? Not specifically Tesla coils, but I've used high voltage coils. I went through a whole phase of building and winding my own little inverters, usually around ferrite cores or little TV flyback transformers. And I got some pretty monstrous voltages. Like, for instance, I was able to drive about 6 feet of neon tube from a 1.5 volt D cell. That's also when I discovered how insulation can break down so easily, and how easy it was if you left them open circuit for even just a fraction of a second, they would arc over between the windings, and that was it, ruined. I spent many, many evenings meticulously doing layers of windings on tape, backwards and forwards, thousands of turns, and then I'd turn it on and you'd see the little glow inside and it'd be wrecked. But I stopped doing that because one day, well, the neons are coming back again. One day I was doing it at my bench in Glasgow, and a little tub of neons just lit up in the component cabinet. I was thinking, oh, that's the voltage gradient causing that, and that's not going to be good for the other components. So I kind of stopped it. That's why when I did the Darson valve, the sort of violet wand video, I started it through in the staircase away from my bench, and then brought the other stuff through and recorded that at the bench. James Zveers asks, what do you most like about the Isle of Man and miss most about Glasgow? The Isle of Man, I love the sort of storminess. I like the fact that it's a very down-to-earth, industrial, farming, fishing type place with lots of beardy men. But Glasgow, what I miss about Glasgow is the hustle and the bustle. It just pops. It's a great city. I'm going to have to, now that COVID's getting past, I want back, because when I went back to Glasgow there, I managed to get a blister on my feet after just 2 days with just walking and walking and walking. And within 5 days, I'd worn out the insoles. Glasgow, because there's so much to see and so many shops and things like that, I just walked. I walked my socks off, literally, in Glasgow. Emmett Pickerel says, I live on a bridgeless island as well, Vashon Island near Seattle. Quite a lot less remote than the Isle of Man, but I'm always fascinated by the challenges faced by living on an island. We have some here, delivery of large items, lack of enough postal cards as people order online more, power outages and stuff like that. It's one of the things that riles me is when you order stuff. It happened recently. I ordered a Pine-Sil computerized soldering iron, and when I went online, I went to their website because everybody was saying, oh, it's great, you should try it, and I thought, I'll give that a go. I ordered it. It said, where are you based? Isle of Man. It gave me the postage charge for the Isle of Man, which was typical of what it was for the rest of the UK as well, because it's probably using the Royal Mail for the final delivery. And I placed the order, and then a while later they contacted me and said, we can't deliver it to you because you're in the Isle of Man and we can't find anybody who delivers there. So you're going to have to give us a UK address for it, and that's not really practical. I could get it sent to friends, but I'm just going to see what happens. But that's the sort of thing that happens here. It's also quite difficult getting certain chemicals because they're hazardous and it comes by air freight. Laserlord asks, is there a good way to stop piling on side hobbies and still feel like I'm progressing in each? Essentially, I have a hobby hoarding problem and don't want to give up on any of them, and I bet a lot of us here feel similarly. I think that's fairly common. I skip from project to project and sometimes go into different areas like the glitter lamps and lava lamps, and you do a whole load and then you go back to another project. It happens. Must of Us Fleas says, I had a small fire in my workshop, and I can recommend that method for clearing out old abandoned projects because the smoke ruins everything. I don't want to do that. That's very decisive, but it's something I want to avoid. SEL says, thanks to you I bought my very first ozone air purifier, the white rechargeable one for fridges. I've noticed it smells similar to the plasma globe lamp. Are they similar? The reason it's similar, if you touch the plasma globe lamp, it's the energy it's been coupled capacitively through the glass creates tiny little arcs at your fingertip. You don't see them. You might feel a slight fuzz, but you don't really see much. But it's creating just like plasma, the violet ones. If you sniff your fingers, they'll smell like ozone because it's the same principle of a corona discharge on the surface of the glass. Merrick says, of all the things you've carbonated, what is your favourite alcoholic and non-alcoholic carbonated drink? Favourite non-alcoholic carbonated drink is just plain water. I like carbonated water. The favourite alcoholic one was probably the whiskey. It was a surprise. It was quite nice. Chris Harvey asks, which of your videos do you enjoy the most making? And what's the biggest, most prominent project you've ever worked on, your working career or most famous, except YouTube? I like all the videos. Every video is different. I quite like the build videos, but they always turn out really long. And I know I'm in a hiding to nothing when I do a big long build video because not as many people watch the longer videos. But the trashy, clickbaity ones are also quite fun just for the naughtiness of making a clickbait video. Most famous project? Probably Disney, really. Or some of the props I've done for productions for BBC programmes in particular. Hard to say in particular, but quite proud of certain things like, say for instance, I was quite proud of my involvement with the George Square Christmas lights in Glasgow, and I was quite proud of my involvement in the sort of the final generation of the Spectromen in the Spectromagic Parade. I had my software in their outfits and control systems. James asks, what do you think has been the most important safety creation for electrical work? RCDs, GFCIs, singularly one of the best devices for safety. David Ward says, if you could spend a day, have a meal and drink with anyone past or present, who would it be? Most people think I'd want to choose somebody like Nikola Tesla or something like that, but to be honest, if you did travel through time, I wouldn't be able to resist telling him what was happening in the future. And it would change the direction he took, so you couldn't do that, the whole paradox thing. But really, there are certain people who took their own lives, and if I could choose to go and have a meal with someone at any time, I'd go back and I'd save their life, fundamentally. I'd talk them out of it. That's what I'd do. Would you ever consider doing videos about more retro technology? I really should. I quite like the retro technology. Particularly some of the older elevator stuff, which I have some of here, which will be appearing. GTR Car 5 says, do you believe in Silicon Heaven? Well, I believe in Silicon Heaven as much as I believe in human heaven, which isn't really that much. Bit awkward. Talkie Toaster, etc. That's a reference to Crichton and Talkie Toaster on Red Dwarf. Gregor de Brull says, what was an electrical concept or component that took you a long time to understand? Oh, tricky. I'm not really sure. Component-wise, the triacs were quite complex initially because they can be triggered with different polarities and different quadrants, but with different sensitivity. And the way they latch, I'm not really sure. Then there's some odd unijunction type transistors, programmable unijunction transistors that I've never really explored properly. I'm not really sure about that. I guess ultimately microcontrollers probably classes as one of the most complex program devices. Right, at this point in time, I've hit the 20-minute mark. I've got a little timer here to keep these at modest length, so I'm going to stop the video here. Remember that you can leave more questions down below in the comments, and I'll maybe comb through them and pick some out and we can do another one. But in the meantime, I'm going to record an episode 2 of this, which will cover the remaining questions here. So that is the end of this current version.